Richard Denzler Hazen, and I was born on the 17th of February in 1925. I was in Titusville, Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised. I was 16. In fact, I graduated from high school in the spring of 1942. First high school class to graduate after Pearl Harbor. We were known as the good news and the bad news class. The good news was that everybody that was getting out had a job, and the bad news was that it entailed wearing a uniform and you didn't know where you're going to be working. Actually, I got out of high school when I was 17 in 42, and I went a year to prep school up in New England, and then came back in the spring of 43, and my enlistment entailed just all my buddies were leaving in the July contingent, and I came home and I wasn't among them, so I went down to the draft board and I said, "Can I go with my friends?" And they said, "We'd be glad to accommodate you." So I got sworn in on July 5th, 1943. Well, I wound up, I had infantry basic out in Camp Roberts, California. I was one of the group of ASTP people. You took a test, and if you qualified with a high enough IQ, they were taken at that time, these ASTP boys, and put them in college. I thought they would be able to get more out of them that way than the other. So I went in that ASTP thing, and I got shipped from Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, all the way to Camp Roberts, California, for basic training. And after the basic was over, well, then I came back to a small school in South Central New York, Alfred University, and there were about 200 of us there. And boy, was that good duty, because the town of Hornell was about 12 miles away, town of maybe 15, 18,000, and they took the National Guard Armory and turned it into a USO, and there were girls all over the place, and we were the only, about 200 of us, the only GIs in the whole neighborhood, so that was good duty. Well, it was the Army Specialized Training Program, and what they did was they took, if you wanted to take that test, why, you could, and our whole battalion out in California was a ASTP bunch. And they didn't have anybody in it that had more than 2 years of college, and some of them that had none. So we were 18 to 21 or 22-year-old kids in this battalion. And then after we had our infantry basic training at Camp Roberts, California, why then they sent us to different schools. And we were there from, it must have been about October, late October of 43 to the following March. And what they did was, then at that time, they found out they weren't going to win the war with bombing them from the air, and they threw out the ASTP program, they threw out the air cadets and the whole bit, and I got shipped to Camp Shelby, Mississippi in the 69th Division, which had been down there since May of 1943, and but they had been there kind of as a training division and sending out people, and so when I wound up down there, well, then it was from late March until the following October before we went overseas. When we came down there, why, there was the cadre of the older guys, and they'd been down there training troops for a year since the division was formed. And so we caught some flack being pencil pushers coming in there, of course. And when we walked them down on a couple of speed marches, why, then we were, kind of accepted. Well, we got shipped out of from Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. We went over to Europe in November of 1944, and had Thanksgiving on the boat. And the boat was a dandy. It was called the Santa Maria, which is one of Columbus's boats, but it was actually a converted banana boat, I think, from South America. And there were only about 600 of us on that boat, so when they stacked them in there, you know how small it was. And the North Atlantic in November is rough as a cob, and we'd go way down in a wave trough and come way up, and you could see the rest of the convoy. And way down again, all you could see was water. And most everybody was sick as a pup. I didn't get sick because I'd borrow some of the other guys' food dining cards that they punched, so I could, you know, I kept myself stuffed. Got to England just about the 1st of December, and we shipped at the same time. There was another division went with us. It came from Camp Shelby, 106th Division, and they had been doing the same thing down there for that the 69th had been doing, of training troops, and then next thing you know, they were shipping them out as replacements where they needed them. And when they were getting ready for the invasion, this is for, and I may have my dates messed up there, but at any rate, no, that's right. We were at Shelby because I remember sitting down there in the woods down there when they critiquing a problem, and somebody came up and said, "Have these men heard about the invasion?" Well, that was D-Day, June 6th, 44. So at any rate, we wound up getting over there at the end of November, 1st December. 106th Division went to the continent, and we went to England. And the 106th got spread out in Belgium, and they're one of the divisions that got run over in that bulge up there. In fact, they had the largest number of surrendered American troops that ever occurred. 2 regiments out of that division that were just creamed by the Germans coming through there. They were spread out over about 20 miles in these hills and wintertime, and no experience. It was supposed to be a quiet section, and the Germans knew they were there. And then on Christmas Day of 1944, they came through our division, and they took all of the riflemen out of each squad. And in an infantry squad, there's 12 men. There's 5 riflemen and a BAR team and a squad leader and an assistant squad leader. And they took the 5 riflemen and the assistant squad leader out of every squad on Christmas Day and shipped them. In fact, they flew them over to the continent over there because they needed replacements at the bulge. Our assistant squad leader wound up in the 99th Division. He got killed over there. In fact, that was another one of the divisions that they were just moving online. The Germans had good information on what was going on our side. And when they decided to make that that bulge offensive, they were trying to get to Antwerp, is what they were trying to do, to get over there to where we were landing a lot of our materiel and so on and so forth. And they were trying to get to Antwerp. And the 99th was another division that got walloped pretty badly. Luckily, I was on a BAR team, so I didn't get that airplane ride across there. Browning automatic rifle, and it has a magazine. I've forgotten how many rounds it had, probably 20 rounds. That was it would fire automatically. You could pull the trigger down, and it would fire the whole 20 rounds. And your regular M1 rifle that we carried was a semi-automatic. I mean, and you had an 8-round clip in it, and you had to squeeze each one of them off. But the BAR and you had to have the guy that was shooting the gun, shooting the BAR, and a couple of fellows that went with him in a team that were ammunition carriers and so on and so forth, and also could fire the BAR. And the German tanks were much better than ours. And the German automatic weapons were much better than ours. Their rifle was not as good as that M1. And their vehicles for moving stuff around were not as good as that 2.5-ton truck that we had. So it was really the 2.5-ton truck and the M1 that tipped the balance, so to speak. Because plus the fact that they've been fighting 2 fronts, so Russia and us. When we first moved up, we went right up into that area where that bulge had taken place, And I can't, I don't know the French pronunciation. Saint-Vé, I think, is Saint-Vé is the way because the way it's spelled. But we went through there, and I don't believe there was a building in that town that had more than 3 walls standing. And the Germans came through there initially when they went through, and when was it, 39. They came through there in 39. Americans pushed them back through it again. They came through again at the bulge and almost got through. That was one of the hubs of the roads there. And when we came through there, there were all kinds of, a lot of tank battles there, and I would say the number of disabled American tanks outnumbered the German tanks, I don't know, 2 to 1. In fact, when we finally got over there and on the continent and moved up, we had to get refilled with the guys that, with replacements for the ones we lost at Christmas time. And so we finally got those people in there, and we moved up, and we didn't get into, actually committed, the division wasn't committed until about the, I don't know, it was either real late January or early February. And where we were committed to, we were right across the road up in the piney woods facing the German Siegfried line. And on the other side of the road was what was left of the 99th Division. And they were jumpy. They said, you stay on your own side of the road. That we shoot first and ask who it is later. One thing I want to say too is when we came out of France in those darn old boxcars, 40 and 8s actually, old boxcars, that they were moving us from one place to another to get up to where we could truck on to get committed in Belgium. We came from France into Belgium. And I probably shouldn't say this, I'll offend some French people, but I bet I can get a lot of substantiation to it. The French were sitting on their duff with their hand out, waiting for the Americans to do something for them. We got across that border, and you could see that all the difference in the world. The Belgians were out there trying to clean up their torn up towns. They brought pots of this ersatz coffee that they had, you know, made out of grain. They brought it out to give us a cup of coffee, you know, and hot coffee, because it was cold. And my opinion of the Belgians and how they reacted to the Americans, and they were gonna help and do what they could. And my experiences with the French was not very good. Then we went through the Siegfried line, and which was that, you know, the French had the Maginot line and the Germans had the Siegfried line, these concrete emplacements and tank traps and all that business. And we went through there and worked our way on up to the Rhine River. And we were actually, my division, and it was pretty close to where that Remagen Bridge was, the only bridge that was not blown up by the Germans. You know, they stumbled onto it. The 9th Armored Division stumbled onto it and actually got across it before it collapsed. And we were fairly close to that. And then when we crossed the Rhine, we crossed in these little Navy assault boats, just like they had done when they came in on the beach at Normandy. And we crossed over there across the Rhine at Koblenz. Not anything like the fellows had that were fighting in Normandy. I mean, it was not that concerted. You get pockets of it, and most of it in communities or road junctions. You had to be on guard because you didn't know and of course in some places the quality of the German troops was not very good, but by the same token, a 14, 15-year-old kid with a rifle in his hand, if he knew how to shoot it, he could kill you just as dead as a stormtrooper or a SS trooper. And every now and then you'd run into a few those SS troops, and they had, you know, they were a horse of a different color. They know how to fight and had a lot of pride in their units and so on. And then I've had occasions when somebody waved a white towel or whatever out of a window, and then you got on past them, and then the next thing you know, they're shooting at you. The Germans were, at least where we were, thinking back, uh, we were going through, marching up through there, and what the Germans did was a lot of them, they pulled out of that and went back, and it was wooded area, a lot of it. And they'd actually blast the trees and blow them so they'd fall down, so they'd fall across the road, so you couldn't get your mechanized stuff up there. And we had this lieutenant from Texas that had a real twang, Brown, and we were tired of carrying this and that, and took our gas masks out of the bag, the packet that they were in, and we're throwing them away and carrying other stuff in there. Now, ma'am, don't throw those gas masks away. Here the Krauts are hauling gas. Somebody yelled at him and says, Lieutenant, they aren't hauling gas, they're hauling ass. Oh, Lord. One thing, when we got through there, we got us mobile showers up there, and I had the first shower I'd had in 6 weeks, which, you know, if you have any inclination towards being clean and fastidious, why that it was very welcome, to say the least, because you stand on a piece of cardboard or whatever in the snow and heat water in a steel helmet and give yourself a bath. But that was the first shower, and they had these mobile showers that they brought up, and if you had a chance to catch up to you, why, you get a, and I remember that was 6 weeks from the time I'd had the last shower. It was the worst winter in 40 years in Europe, cold and snowy. And there was an awful lot of problems with our troops in that we didn't have some of the right gear. Those GI boots that they had, you get them wet and then they'd freeze, and you know, and so on. And there was a lot of trench foot. That, in fact, one of the guys that was in my squad, he'd go into a bunker at night, rub his feet, try to, you know, get the circulation back. And the last time I saw him, he was going back somewhere to a hospital with trench foot. You could find an old cellar somewhere, maybe, with the building that you're in might have been blown to heck, and you're down in the cellar, but you didn't stay anywhere long enough to do much about it. Every now and then they'd get a kitchen up with hot food, and the rest of the time we were eating K rations. Well, we got through across the Rhine, and we first town of any real significance that my division happened to come up with was Kassel, K-A-S-S-E-L, and my division and I can't remember what the other one was, took that city. It was an industrial city, and in fact, that's one of the places where they made their tanks. The Germans had tank factory there. From Kassel and then several other towns, and the next great big city that we came into was Leipzig. And at Leipzig, there was us and the 2nd Division, and we both went in there. And in fact, there's enough confusion when you're doing stuff like that. Part of our outfit and part of their outfit were shooting at each other during the night. You know, you couldn't tell who was who. And then from Leipzig, why, we went up to the town of Halle, and then my outfit got assigned to, it was a great big poison gas dump up there, and the biggest one, supposedly the largest one that the Germans had in the woods in these bunkers and so on. So we wound up stationed there to do guard duty on this great big gas dump that supply the dump. And one of my part of my division progressed on up to Torgau on the Elbe River, and that's where we were the first troops. The division was the first one to meet the Russians coming from the east. Where I happened to be, I wasn't up at the actual meeting. Oh, there was lots of vodka and everything else going on, and the Russians liked their automatic weapons, and they said they were riding horseback up and down the streets of Torgau with their machine pistols, spraying the walls and, you know, having a big time. But this one Russian column that was coming through there had come all the way across, and they were all laughing, and what they had was they had dogs pulling stretchers. They had them harnessed up to a little stretcher, and then they were in these big wagon type, cart type things, And they had their women right with them. They had women that fought right with them, about one to the squad. And here they are coming through there and laughing and pointing back over their shoulders. And one of our fellows could speak a little Russian. What were you laughing at? Well, at the end of the column, you'll see. Well, the only mechanized piece of equipment that those guys had was an officer pushing at the back end of the column a motorcycle, and it wouldn't run. And that's what they were laughing at. So they were a ragtag bunch, but they had come all the way across, picking up, looting horses or getting horses, and that's how that particular group moved, was by cart and walking motorcycles, and had their women with them. But where I was stationed, here was a Russian. We were up far enough east that we had to evacuate that was going to be Russian territory after the war was over. And we met up the Russians on April 25th, and the fighting in Europe ended on May 8th. So it was just a matter of a little over a week and a half till it was over with. And all this time the Germans were streaming towards us because they preferred to surrender to the Americans and not the Russians, because they had scorched Russia pretty good, and they didn't want any part of being a prisoner of war of the Russians. They knew we'd be easy on them, and we were, I think, in some respects. And I had one place where I was stationed after the war was over, where we had a compound of troops, and they had to prisoners, and they had to process them. So it took some time, and the civilians would come up and try to get some food to them, and I personally get some food for someone. It could have been a relative or somebody that they knew, locally. But so I let them take the food to them. One of the things that you always were doing at that particular time too was looking very carefully at the civilians that were walking around, because a lot of them had on military boots, and what they'd done had gotten closed and gotten out of their uniforms. So you had to be cautious about that. We were not supposed to leave. If you knew it was a German troop, why, capture them. And then another thing that happened to me personally that just broke my heart. We were going and moving so fast, and I got a hold of a Browning 16 millimeter, 16 gauge shotgun. And we were moving so fast, and I wasn't going to carry it, so I took that, and it had all this beautiful squirrel work on it and whatnot. Oh God, the dang gun probably worth $4,000 or $5,000 today at least. And I took that and stuck it between the bars of a picket fence, and did that and bent the barrel on it. We weren't supposed to leave anything behind that would shoot. When you're walking, you don't take anything more than you need to. Came across some of those camps where they had the Jews and so on, and when you saw some of that situation, well, you knew you were in the right place. Put a stop to that. The ones that were in the concentration camps were in such terrible physical shape that there wasn't much they could do. Quite frankly, they were just glad that we got there and got them out of that mess. I didn't personally, but some of the fellows in my outfit did, yeah. In fact, I think there was one boy in my outfit that actually, it was not just the German Jews, but there were prisoner of war camps for soldiers and airmen and so on. And this one fellow in another regiment actually got to a prisoner of war camp that his brother was in, and got the chance to release his brother. Of course, we won. When we won the war, well, then of course, what are we going to do with these people that we had overcome, and primarily in Europe initially, and it came up, of course, with that Marshall Plan, where there was a big effort by the American people to help get those countries back on their feet. They could see the value of trying to treat them decently. It went back to the same thing that I said earlier about sitting there with a whole compound full of prisoners, and somebody comes up and they know somebody in there, and they brought them something to eat or drink, go ahead. They had that point system, and you had, I think the first group that came back had to have about 65 points, I think, to come back. And my division, we got put into, us that gotten over there in that fall of '44. By the summer of '45, they were shipping troops home. And we filled, my division, most of us went into what they called ordnance, which was repair of trucks and so on and so forth, which I did too. And they filled my division up with a lot of them were from the 29th Division, which had hit Omaha Beach with the first, well, the 29th and the 1st hit Omaha Beach on the invasion. And there were some of those guys that, shoot, they might have been wounded 2 or 3 times and sent back up, you know. And that was in the, and then I didn't get, and the time I got down to my point level, which was, you got 1 point for every month you were in the service, and I think you got 2 points, was the way it went for months overseas. And I can't remember, but I think I was in the 33 months, of which about half of it was stateside and half of it was, so when you add those up, well, it's quite a ways from 65 in the points. So I didn't actually get shipped home until the spring of '46. When I came back in the end of March of '46, and I knew what I wanted to do for a occupation when I came back. I'd been raised in northwestern Pennsylvania oil fields, and my hometown of Titusville was where the first well was drilled. The oil industry got started there in 1859. And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. Well, I wanted to go to Penn State, where they had a petroleum engineering course, and the head of the Veterans Administration down there was married to a girl from my hometown, Titusville, and he said, we're not going to be able to take these vets on campus. We're going to have to farm them out at the state teachers' colleges throughout the state, of which there were 10 or a dozen of these state teachers' colleges around. Yeah, I don't know, and I applied at Allegheny College, which was a small liberal arts college that my dad had actually gotten his pre-med from back years before, and got accepted there, so I thought I'll go there, and I can transfer anywhere out of there because it had an excellent reputation for a small school. Well then, lo and behold, during that freshman year of college, I found out from the same man that they were going to have to leave the vets in the state teachers college for 2 years before they brought them on campus down there at State College in Pennsylvania. And I said, I don't like that idea. And I didn't want to go to Pitt. That was the only other petroleum engineering school in the East at that time, because Pitt at that time was a skyscraper downtown Pittsburgh. Didn't appeal to me. So anyway, I had a friend there that had been stationed in Norman, Oklahoma in the Navy during the war. And he said, why don't we go down to OU? So we both applied down there. He was wanting some other course, I don't know what it was, but anyway, I got accepted. And one of the reasons that so many guys, vets, wound up down there at OU was they had these Navy bases down there. They had a south base and a north base. And so they had billets for them. They had buildings that they could house the people in. And so anyway, I went then from northwestern Pennsylvania in the fall of 1947 down to, by train, down to Norman, Oklahoma, where I got my petroleum engineering degree. And I also became a big Sooner fan because I was there Bud Wilkinson's first 4 years. And man, did they have a football team in those days. But anyway, the GI Bill was there, and that helped. When I went going to OU, I worked in the oil fields in West Texas and New Mexico in the summers. And we got about 92 or maybe 95 cents an hour. And that was the best paying labor job practically in the country. The oil business was, but oil was $2 when I first started in eastern Kentucky. Oil was $2.73 a barrel. And Pennsylvania grade crude was 4.25, as I recall, and it had a premium on it because it was paraffin based instead of asphalt based. But 273 a barrel, and until it came up to, well, it was after I moved out here in '73 when the Arabs over there realized how much that stuff was worth, and you know, we had that 72, 73 shortage of oil, and the price just. But it wasn't the only thing that went up. Labor went up, steel went up, everything else, and inflation just, you know. I started to work in eastern Kentucky for $275 a month when I got out of Oklahoma in 1951, January 1951, when I graduated. And $275 a month, but I was working, you know, when you get out in the oil field working, you work till the job's done. And I was guaranteed enough overtime to make 3.25. So the next thing you know, I'm making $3.50, $3.75 and whatnot. And cheap beggars took me off the overtime deal and gave me a raise to 3.25. So, but when those days when I was single, I almost always had an extra paycheck in my pocket that I hadn't cashed. You couldn't, and on you couldn't get along on, or you don't get along in this day and age on 3.25 a week. I met her in Western Kentucky when I was back working for Ashland Oil and Refining Company, and I got transferred from Eastern Kentucky to Western Kentucky, and a little town of Henderson, Kentucky, right across the river from Evansville, Indiana, Western Kentucky out there. And I met her on a blind date at a J.C. picnic at Audubon Park in Henderson, Kentucky. James J. Audubon was from that neck of the woods, and they've got a beautiful park back there, the Audubon Park. So I met her at a blind date, in Henderson. I decided I want to get my master's, and they weren't so picky at Penn State about that time. So I got in up there and got my master's at Penn State, and came back out here, or came back to work in that part of the world, the Illinois Basin. And then the company that I worked for when I got out wound up transferring me out here in 1968. And I got transferred from Evansville, Indiana, down on the Ohio River, to Denver. July 1st of 1968, we arrived in Broomfield. In fact, I was all set to buy a house down here. I can't remember the name of the company that had it, but building a development down not very far from Villa Italia. And the guy the fellow that transferred me out here was a Broomfield resident, a fellow named Bob Peterson. And I thought, I don't know whether I want to live in the same town with my boss or not, you know. So we were looking down there. And at the same time, Melvin and Eleanor McKinley had moved out here about a year before that, and we knew them from back in Western Kentucky. Eleanor McKinley and my wife's next younger sister were like that in high school, you know, all the way. So anyhow, well, they wanted us to move here. Well, at first I didn't like the idea, but finally I said, well, I'll look around, and got a hold of, in fact, this Peterson sick Jim Van Buskirk onto me. And of course, Jim's been here since Hector was a pup, and he was in the real estate business then. So anyway, we looked around to see what was available here, and I came within an hour and a half of signing up to get a house built over in Northmore, and this house was for sale, and it was part of the 1959 Denver Parade of Homes, so it was 9 years old. And landscaped to the teeth. I mean, it had 13 pinyon trees on it, and I could see the workmanship was great. And we had 5 kids, and here's the high school, a block and a half up the street. So when this was available, Jim brought us by here to look at it. And so we made an offer, and the guy took it. And we were out here. We came out in the spring before we actually moved to look for a place when I knew I was getting transferred. So we bought this house, and I've been here ever since. So it's been 32 years. My next door neighbor went to Dartmouth, and he graduated from Dartmouth, and he had a reserve commission in the Marines, in the United States Marines. And when the war broke out, he went to immediately to Quantico in Virginia, and he wound up as a communications officer for Merritt Edson's 1st Marine Raider Battalion on Guadalcanal. And the Japanese would infiltrate and cut their forward observer lines and listen into what they were doing. And Bill Stevenson had Navajo Indian boys in his outfit. And later there was quite a bit of talk about these code talkers and so on, but as far as I know, this is the first time it was done. And he put Navajo boys on both ends of those communications, and they have no written language. And and he, my folks had it, I don't have it now, and don't remember what became of it, but had a picture of him getting the Legion of Merit pinned on him by Admiral Bull Halsey for that deal there in on Guadalcanal. I'm not much of a joiner, but my wife was, and she had actually, when they first started those, first started, she took over that when they were doing the Meals on Wheels out of Mariel Manor over there. Pat was doing that over there, and I had retired in the spring of '86, so I was her gopher driving to Lafayette up there to where they were preparing the meals and get the food in these big thermal containers and bring it down. Well, I was raised in a small town of about 8,000 people, and you can take the boy away from the small town, but you can't take the small town away from the boy. And quite frankly, when we moved out here in '68, that's about the size of Broomfield. It was 8,000, maybe a little bit bigger. Now we're talking 40, and I'm not happy. But what are you going to do? It's, I guess, progress. And people, there's lots of good jobs around here, and you know, that type of thing. But I'd like to go on these extended fishing trips up into Montana. Every time we come back down I-90 and 25, we come through Sheridan, Wyoming, and I say, man, this place looking better to me every time I come down the road. I don't like crowds, and you know, and it's just been a tremendous difference in the ease of getting around in the last 5 to 7 or 8 years out here. It's just, but that's, you know, you get set in your ways. Nobody knows what the threat was to our way of life by the Japanese to the west and the Germans to the east. And if we hadn't stood up to them, you'd be speaking either Japanese or German or both. And the young people don't realize that. And I don't think we've got near the amount of patriotism that we've got, and I don't know, on the basis of the unhappiness that came about from the Vietnam War, I don't think we could muster an effort like that again. I don't think that the stuff is in the younger generation to do it. Too much freedom, and I don't think there's just not the attitude that was at that time. It's been too easy, quite frankly. Generally speaking, it's been too easy. Now, if it's, or it seems that way to me anyway, and I know there's lots of people that are struggling, but there's lots of people that are doing just like the French did too, and they're sticking their hand out to get it handed to them. I've got a friend that I have fished with some, he had ran an insurance company for a number of years. Frank Vasco, here, he lives here in town. And he said that the way I look at it, if you were born prior to 1950, that you lived to work. And if you were born after 1950, you worked to live. In other words, you just worked as much as you needed to in order to get the materialistic things that you want. And he's not very far from wrong in a lot of respects. I personally think there's too much materialism, and me first. Me too. NIMBY, not in my backyard, you know, and all of that attitude. It's a different attitude than it was when I grew up. I grew up during the Depression, and people helped each other and so on. And I do think that this Front Range community here, Denver and all, do a great job in trying to do things for people that are less fortunate. I'm impressed with that. I doubt that there's any. But there's so much of this, get out of my way, and that's not the way I want it. And it's not as easy going as it was. And quite frankly, what we've been dosed with over the years, and I'm not a prude by any means, but some of the stuff that gets stuck on television gives this younger people, and I've got a 16-year-old grandson living with me, and some of the stuff that comes off of that tube in there, I don't think he needs to be having that running around in his mind, but that's today.